Welcome to Simple Healthy Life, where our goal is to have real, insightful discussions on topics that we find interesting. And today, MJ, I'd like to talk about, I guess, what we call emotional intelligence. And I know this is a topic that you're very excited to chat about, but maybe kind of give the brief overview for those who haven't heard the term. Maybe just define it for us.
Oh, defining
Yeah.
emotional intelligence. Okay. Well, there's a few different aspects of emotional intelligence. At its core level, it's an understanding of your own emotions and the way that they are affecting you, because they are affecting you almost at all times.
Mhm.
And the second part of this is an understanding of the people around you in their emotions. So it's inwardly your own emotions and outwardly the emotions of the people around you.
Mm.
Um, what we learn when we are actively engaged in becoming emotionally intelligent is that our behavior is driven in large part by our emotions.
Mm.
What I want to talk to you today specifically about is how emotions show up in the body.
Mm.
So our emotions are comprised of our thoughts and our physiological response
Mhm.
to the thoughts. And that physiological response is something that I think our audience misses, and I think we all miss quite a bit. And I want to talk to you today about it because I know it's something that you find interesting as well. And I feel like it's something that we can share with people to help them to say, kind of give them some aha moment.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's a cool topic because I don't believe most people associate emotions with a physical feeling, right? But this is probably how most of us actually recognize the flavor of the mind at any moment, right? I mean, I think of like, heart racing, shortness of breath kind of feeling as anxiety, and in some ways, I might notice that before anything else. And it's interesting that we're also having this conversation because just today I was talking with a client about how we externalize our emotions into behaviors, and sometimes we can recognize the the externalization of these emotions either in behaviors or physically before anything else, and those can give us kind of a good insight to the mind because you're busy, right? Like we're all busy. We're busy living our lives, and so I don't know about you, but I certainly, maybe I need to do it more, but I certainly don't sit there, at 10 a.m. and be like, what am I feeling today? What is my emotion, right? And I think it's a good practice to check in with yourself, but it's hard. It's hard when you're kind of going about your day. Um, so then why do you find it important for yourself, I suppose?
So we did a podcast recently about grief,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the first time in my life that I ever, and I'm 42, and it was on my 42nd birthday that this happened. So it was the first time in my life that I realized that my body was sad.
Mm.
So I've been sad. We've all been sad. And when I had this epiphany that my body was sad, it was because I was sitting there and I wasn't thinking. I was actually in a state of kind of no thought.
Yeah.
Not that I'm an expert meditator or anything, but I realized I wasn't thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and I just started crying, just hysterically crying.
Yeah.
I had some grief.
Yeah.
My body was showing me that I had grief,
Mm.
and it became an outward expression.
Mm.
And I kind of almost chuckled to myself, like, wow, that wasn't that weird and funny and interesting. But I started to go down this path and started to realize now when I have an emotional reaction, where is it? What's happening in my body when I'm having an emotional reaction?
Mm.
So the other day, we were at jujitsu. Just nothing. It was just a regular match against somebody else. But it happened to be that it was like, quote unquote, the finals. And it was just me
Yeah.
versus one other kid, a guy in the class. And everybody was watching. And I started to feel anxiety,
Mm.
like actual real anxiety around it. and I was stopped for a second, and that feeling was right over my heart. My heart was racing a little bit, but it wasn't just my mind. My heart was racing or my mind was racing. It was a feeling of excitement. It was a feeling of I knew everybody was going to be watching, so I wanted to perform. So in a way, it was performance anxiety, but I felt it in my body. I could tell you exactly where, I could point to it, exactly where I was feeling it. And I think that that happens to everybody, but they don't necessarily notice it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, it's kind of interesting that you phrase it that way. You kind of start off saying, oh, I felt anxiety that I'm in this, role of this combat situation and people are watching me and I feel anxiety. But then you went on to describe it as like almost this like energizing kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, we had, you and I have had discussions on how, emotions can be framed mentally with kind of like a frame of reference. So if you're noticing, okay, my heart rate's increasing, I'm breathing heavier, I'm a little bit more aware, I'm cognizant that I'm being watched. But you took that information, that like external information, and made it almost like a positive thing for that moment, rather than being like, oh no, I'm so anxious, like what if I fail, and then like getting armbarred and choked 10 times.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that, because like what it didn't do is I felt the feeling of anxiety, and it didn't make me slow and crippled and want to go sit and want to remove myself from the situation. It felt the feeling of anxiety, and it energized me. I felt this competition ready. It was like maybe because of the million reps that we've done, but I felt good. I was like, okay, I have this feeling. I know what it is. I know how to handle it. Let's go. Now, I don't know what it would have felt like if I sat for an hour and dwelled on it and thought about like, oh my God, in an hour, I'm going to have to do this thing in front of the class, and maybe I don't win and all that stuff. But that wasn't the case. This case was just simply, I felt it. I was able to frame it in such a way that I went out there and performed, right? The outcome doesn't matter. I didn't win, but that doesn't matter. But either way. So I think this happens to people all the time. I think we society have taken these emotions, this emotion of fear, this emotion of sadness, and we've labeled it good, bad. That's it. There's no in between. If you're sad, it's bad. If you're fearful, it's bad. If you're happy, it's good. And I think that we can really internalize that and figure out where we feel it in the body, because the body feels it. The body absolutely does. And it sends you signals that are just as powerful as injuries, in my opinion. Injuries, not the greatest example. I'll give you another example. When you are happy, your facial expression changes. Your body physically changes to show your teeth. You're smiling. Right? That's an easy one. That's a normal one. That's one that society tells us is good. Okay? When you're sad, what happens? What's your face do? Right? What's your body language do? Right? These are all things that we don't recognize or we don't correlate as emotional responses from the body. And there's so many more.
Right.
And when we spend time in reflection, spend time in that moment of sadness or joy, and really look at ourselves in the mirror and say, oh my God, my body's doing this thing. It can help us clue us in to these emotions and really help us to get to the bottom of them. And I think that's what's important for people to understand, is that if you start reframing and looking at emotions as neither good or bad, you get the opportunity to spend time in reflection on them and processing them. And that is a super powerful tool that people can use.
Yeah, no, well said. I mean, I think it makes perfect sense, right? Why else would we have emotions if we weren't supposed to feel them?
Right.
I every now and again I have a client that comes in and they'll be like, well, Ryan, I'm feeling really depressed, and I mean, many of the clients I do work with, are kind of like experiencing chronic depression to some degree, but every now and again they'll say, well, I'm feeling real extra depressed today. And I'm like, well, what's going on? And so and so died or whatever. So like some big life stressor. And in part of me wants to be like, well, good. I mean, you kind of should feel depressed. Like that's so normal, so natural. But I feel like the way that they go about even just like framing the emotion is like so bad. It's like I don't want that here. Like get this away. Like what can I do? Do I need to eat differently? Do I need to wake up early? Do I need to go out and get some sunlight? It's like no, you probably should just feel the depression for a little bit, right? Because there's a reason why. And not to say that chronic depression is maybe that's there's more to that picture, but for something big and for you to have an emotional response that I guess for all intents and purposes does feel negative. I mean, I think it has its role. It's serving some role, and it's so natural to feel those negative emotions in response to things.
Absolutely. It's a natural thing that we have taken as society and only learned to process half of it, right? So what we teach our young people is, I'll give you an example. You walk in the house tomorrow and you tell 2 5-year-olds that they're going to Disney. Let's pretend that they know what Disney is, and they're 7, 9. We tell 2 9-year-olds they're going to Disney, right? What are they going to do? They're going to freak out. They're going to jump up and down. They're going to yell and scream. They're going to process that emotion in a way that we perceive to be good. We're like, keep it up. Yeah, look, that makes me happy to see how happy you are. Good job. You can tell 2 9-year-olds or 2 6-year-olds that they're going to Disney World, and they could freak out and start throwing stuff and jumping up and down and going too far with that processing of emotion. It's still just a process of emotion. You could tell your wife you're going to Disney. She might smile and laugh, right? Those are all processing emotion. Now flip it. Now what happens when the bad stuff happens? And we have to process that emotion. What are we told? Don't. Stop. Stop crying. Did I just sound like my mom? No. Sorry, Mom.
Stop, you're triggering me.
Stop crying. Yes. Stop crying, right? Slow down. Don't do that. Relax, right? Telling someone that's upset to relax. Does that work?
Yeah.
No, right? So what do we just pushed all of these perceived bad emotions into this little hole. And then, so what do we do about that? As we grow, we learn how to do that. So what do? We push it down. You're right. I'm fine. We just push it down. Well, the thing is, the body hasn't processed that yet. And we've seen all of these things recently, all these studies that have come out about, your emotions, your unprocessed emotions eventually become symptoms, right? And we can get into the anatomy behind it, where your unprocessed emotion stays as, just call it a tightness in the body. And eventually that tightness leads to, issues. We all have it. We all know, we all can all feel it. We all know what I'm saying is true, but we haven't been taught about it. We haven't been able to express it in a way. No one sat us down proactively. We talk about being proactive all the time in this podcast. No one's ever sat us down proactively and said, okay, great. When was the last time you were sad? What did it feel like? When was the last time you got super angry? What did it feel like? Right? And the challenge with that is, it's because we decided that these are bad things.
Yeah.
Not normal things, bad things.
Yeah. The label is the important part.
Right.
Yeah. Have you seen the movie Inside Out?
Just the first one. I haven't seen the second one yet.
I haven't seen the second one. I actually just saw the first one over the weekend.
It's good.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. And, it kind of like speaks to a lot of the things that we know to be true, you and I, and some of the, the research that we, align with. The fact that in this movie, the girl, I don't even remember her name. I just saw it. I don't even remember her name, but
she wasn't even the main character.
Yeah, exactly. This girl's body in life is controlled by these little characters, and each character is like a little emotion, or each emotion is a character rather, and over the course of the movie, 2 of the emotions disappear. One of them is sadness, and they're off doing their own thing. But then the girl has a very like a sad thing to process. But because that sadness emotion isn't there to like run the show, she actually is like stuck in this like almost like catatonic, like not living life kind of state because she's not able to feel sadness. I thought that was kind of like a cool message. I guess the message was that no emotions are bad; they're just there, and at least that's what I took from it. But I thought it was such a good way to teach kids in particular, but just everyone really that we need these emotions to fulfill a role. I mean, why else would sadness be there? There's no other reason, other
Right.
than like just feeling it, right? It just doesn't, it just doesn't have. It's just not present. It's present in every human, so there must be a role to that. And so, I mean, I think you're right about these things can externalize and that can be problematic, the externalization of kind of like repressed emotions or emotions that aren't processed in a coherent, logical, appropriate way, whatever that means. Maybe we'll talk a bit more about that. But we've also talked here about how like men are typically have a lot more aggression, and so when they're feeling the anger emotion, unprocessed, unrecognized, poor emotional intelligence, it externalizes as violent crime. And that's why, men in particular are one of the reasons, I'm sure there's many factors, but one of the reasons why men in particular are more likely to commit violent crimes because they're not processing that emotion, at least in a healthy way, right?
Well, I mean, let's just face it. We're not processing the emotion. And I'll say we, because I'm included. We're not processing the emotion. We weren't taught how to process the emotion. And if you were so inclined to reach out for help, you would be thought of as weak,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'm not saying that I think of people that as weak, but like realistically, do you agree that society would say you're weak? You should be able to handle that.
Right.
And then the next logical question is how? And even the society members that tell you you should be able to handle that can't tell you
Right.
how.
Take your meds.
Exactly. Yeah. Well said. Right? So let's talk about it. How? Right? How do we handle that emotion? Essentially, what I have learned through my own work is you can't talk to an anxious mind.
Mm-hmm.
You can't talk to an angry mind. You can't talk to a racing mind.
Mm.
When your mind is in that alpha state and it is going and those thoughts are going and those thoughts are going and that little ball of yarn is super wound up, you can't talk to it. I can't talk to you. You can't talk to me. It just doesn't work that way.
Mm-hmm.
But what you can do is you can get into it through the body.
Mm.
And we know the mind and the body are connected. And we know that 90% of what's happening on your day-to-day is subconscious. You don't tell your body how to breathe. You don't tell your body where to send the blood. You don't tell your body anything, right? But your body and your mind are talking to each other all the time. So what you can do, and this is a very powerful tool for anybody that's feeling any emotion, including joy.
Mm-hmm.
We don't use it when you're feeling joy because we want to feel it.
Yeah.
You can go to your breath, okay? You can go internalize. When you slow down the mind by extending your exhale, even if it's 2 minutes, check out how you feel. Check out what level you're feeling at. Check that out. And that will be an incredible way for people to use the tools that they have available to them to start to get into the body, to start to feel and start to process these emotions. Now, how do we know this is true? This is my favorite part of our discussion, and I was waiting to say it. Because every kindergarten class in America takes the kid and says, do the breathing, big breath, holds up the sign, breathe.
Yeah.
And all the teachers that are teaching them don't use it for themselves. I had a great conversation with someone recently who was a kindergarten teacher, and I was explaining this to her because she was feeling anxious.
Right.
I was like, let's start to breathe. She's like, oh my God, I teach my kids this.
Yeah.
And then what happens? They get to first grade and they're supposed to know it.
Right.
And then you get to high school and definitely no one's telling you now.
No.
You're especially as a man, you're supposed to know this stuff. That's how that was your growing up process. Well, I didn't really figure it out till I was 40. So might as well hop on this podcast and see if we can share some of this, shed some light for some people.
Right, right. No, that's super helpful, and yeah, I think it's ironic, right? You teach kids these tools, simple tools, but then it's like never, they don't even know what you're talking about most of the time. They're like, okay, breathe, yeah, that's fun, but they're not cognizant enough to connect the dots over years of their life. And so, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense to revisit some of these things even later on in life. And that's a good point. I never had anyone talking about emotion. Never, not a single ounce of like, hey, you're feeling sad, that's okay. Like, I never had that, right? Health class, I mean, what did we learn? I don't even know what I learned in health class. It was like, I mean, I guess as anatomy, I'm not even sure, right? So we don't talk about these things at all. So I think it makes a lot of sense to, I guess if you need to work on it, then you need to work on it. It reminds me a lot of just like eating stuff. I talk to people all day long about like, what does appropriate eating look like? And everyone in their mothers, especially their mothers, sorry, they can tell me, oh, what is a healthful food and what isn't a healthful food, and they have, some they'll nitpick something about every single food on the planet, but no one ever understands how to eat. It's so simple, right? Like, such a simple distinction there. Like, how do we eat? No one ever talks about it. No one ever. You don't actually ever learn that. You get shamed for doing it wrong, but you're like, I don't even know what I did, and then you get praised for doing it right when it might not be right. It's so convoluted, and so yeah. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. Like, we have these like very natural human things, but no one ever talks about how to do them.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. I wrote this down. I want to share it with the audience. I'm sorry, I have to go to my notes, but something that hit me today, and I hope I wrote it in this book. And I didn't. Oh, that's embarrassing. I wrote it in another thing this morning. But essentially, it's what emotion are you feeling?
Mm-hmm.
On a scale from 1 to 10, how bad is it?
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do about it?
How intense is it?
Yeah. Ooh,
Okay.
well said.
Yes.
Yes. How intense is it?
Mm-hmm.
And then what are you going to do about it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think that if you walk people through those exercises, they'll be able to give you the first two.
Mm.
And interestingly enough, when you become more emotionally intelligent, you start to realize that those first two can be broken out into many, many other ones, right? We have the feelings wheel and the things that you work with when you're in the 5th and 6th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Those can be broken out. But how intense is it? And then what are you going to do about it?
Mm.
And the answer for a lot of the time, for many of us, should be, I'm going to feel it.
Mm.
I'm going to feel it in my body, and then I'm going to let it go.
Mm-hmm.
So the second part to this whole thing is, can you be emotionally intelligent about the people around you?
Mm. In what context?
Can you show empathy?
Mm.
Can you show empathy knowing that these emotions are normal for all of us? 99% of us don't handle them in a way that's appropriate. 100% of us don't handle them in the way that you would handle them. So can you just show empathy? Can you say, I'm not sympathizing with you. I don't want to feel your feelings. I just want to feel as though I can understand that you have feelings that are difficult for you.
Mm. Right.
And as you become more emotionally intelligent, as you say to yourself more and more often, okay, this is a normal feeling. I have it, you have it, everybody else has it. I'm going to process it. I'm going to feel it. I'm going to understand where it is in my body, and then I'm going to let it go.
Mm.
And you start to bring that with you to your daily life.
Mm.
When you do start bringing that with you to your daily life, you do start realizing that many, many interactions that you have with other people are emotionally charged, and they're not even realizing it. And you didn't realize it before either. There's a lot of great emotionally charged conversations, a lot of great emotionally charged events, right? But then there's those emotionally charged events like, I'll give you an interesting one that might be at the end of jiu-jitsu sometimes, we take a picture. 30, 40 people that don't really know each other well all have to stand there for what seems like forever while we take the picture, right? That's an event where everybody has a little emotion around it. Some people don't like having their picture taken. Some people don't want to stand next to somebody. Some people don't want to be the guy in the back. Some people have anxiety because they don't feel as though, or they don't know if they're standing in the right position or what the picture is going to look like or all that stuff. So everybody has a little different emotion that's going on right there. But we all come together and we all stand there, right? It's just one example. Another example would be, a sports team playing. We all feel that anxiety, that performance, that desire to be the best, to succeed, to win. We don't always take it out. We don't always show it. We don't always address it. We don't always do it well, but we all have it. So can you say, all right, in this scenario, I know how I'm feeling. I can process that. And I know that everybody else is a little bit on edge too. Make sense?
Yeah. So essentially what you're saying is that you almost want to cultivate self-awareness for how you're feeling so that you can better recognize and adapt your communication with others so that you can recognize how they're feeling. I mean, that's the thing that I kept thinking about. It's like how, as you're talking, how is someone going to empathize with a sad person if they themselves don't allow for sadness? So, it's going to be kind of like shunned, I would imagine, in extreme cases. And at the very least, not validated in an appropriate way, right? There's plenty of people who just want, to vent a specific emotion. Maybe they process things pretty well, or they're like verbal processing pretty well, and to be a person who can allow for that, I think is helpful. If not in just interpersonal relationships, then especially in like professional, relationships, right? If someone is super stressed or like you're managing people and they're all like very anxious about something, I mean, you yourself should be familiar with that feeling within, right? Because you're certainly experiencing it, but if you're always avoiding it for whatever particular reason, you may not empathize as well as you probably should be, and that's going to disrupt connections.
Absolutely. And it's funny that I'm glad that you got into this because there's some stats out there now, and I'll give you one stat from Forbes magazine. 70% of the top leaders in these Fortune 50 companies show greater emotional intelligence than IQ. Proving that emotionally intelligent people make more money, are more successful. I mean, I think we know this, right? Inherently, we know this. You can take I'm going to use the word nerd, right? You can take the lab nerd that never really interacts, doesn't feel his feelings or her feelings, can't empathize with others, super smart. They end up being capped. They end up being stuck in this little spot and can't figure out why. Now, the opposite is true. You can take someone that's not very book smart, doesn't really understand some of the literature, but when they get in a room, they are emotionally intelligent about the way that people are feeling, acting, and they are emotionally intelligent about the way they are feeling and acting, and they become almost magnetic.
Yeah.
Drawing and pulling a team, and some of the best leaders out there, Forbes magazine will tell you, are better at emotional intelligence than they are at IQ.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it makes sense, right? Like if you're a person who can, weather the storm, so to speak, and process that well, then yeah, you're probably going to be able to get back to whatever it is that, whatever the conditions of success are. And speaking on the connection front, yeah, like an emotionally intelligent person is going to be able to connect easier with others, right? So we'll break it down then. Say I'm experiencing anxiety right now. I don't know why. I can barely, just from listening to you, I'm like, okay, I'm experiencing anxiety because my chest is a little tight and my mind is a little racy and I'm sweating a little bit. I don't know anything about these. I'm an alien. What do I do?
Nice, good. Well, first thing is you did the hardest part. You became aware, right? You're aware of what you're feeling. And you mentioned in your introduction that you're aware of where you're feeling it.
Mm-hmm.
You're feeling it in the head and you're feeling it in the heart, the heart area. First thing you can do, close your eyes, pause for a moment, and start to extend your exhale. And what this does, every single time, every single human, it takes their awareness from wherever it is, whether it's on your heart or on your mind, and it brings it specifically to your breath. There's just no way around it. That's what it's going to do. It's going to essentially take your awareness from someplace where you don't have control of it to someplace that you do. As you do that, you can breathe, continue the breathing process, slowing the breathing process, expanding and extending the breathing process. As that happens, your body will respond first, not your mind. Your body will respond first by slowing the heart rate. Then essentially it'll slow the sweat glands.
Mm-hmm.
Then it'll start to slow the mind. Once those things have slowed down, then you can start to understand, okay, now that I don't feel quite as anxious, why? What was it? Why was I feeling anxious? Okay, step 3, now that we have a why, awesome. What about the why really gets me? And this is the big key here. All right, why? Well, why for me was that I was about to go and perform in front of a class. Okay, what about that really was making me anxious? I've done it a million times. I don't know. My desire to look a certain way to the group, my desire to keep up my persona, so to speak, right? That was what was really making me anxious. I didn't want to lose in front of the group. It wasn't that I had to compete against this other person. It was that I didn't want to look bad. I didn't want to feel like I let other people down because they had this perception of me. Okay, cool. The only thing I can do about that is go out there and perform.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Excellent. Go out there and perform.
Yeah.
Didn't go my way. Didn't really feel the anxiety afterwards. I knew that it wasn't a big deal, but that was all real. It had all happened in the matter of a minute, 2 minutes.
So essentially, yeah, like in the performance example, or like teaching in front of a classroom, maybe framing the action as maybe not pass fail and as a learning experience, then maybe that can start to shed some of the negative connotations that we have with whatever it might be. And so recognize, breathe, reframe is essentially what we're
Well said.
saying.
Yeah. Recognize, breathe, pause, reframe. And now the reframe is an interesting thing because when you start to reframe, you start to realize that there is very little difference between the way the body reacts to excitement and anxiety. In fact, there's such little difference that you might be feeling excitement and feel it as anxiety because the body will react almost exactly the same way.
Yeah, so reframing, basically taking a specific thought, such as, I'm going to fail this test, and putting it under a microscope, essentially, and saying, well, is that a true? Is that true for others? Is that true in your experience? Is that true for anyone? And you might say, well, I feel unprepared for this test. Well, is that true? And then you say, well, no, I've prepared enough, that I prepared all that I could. I did everything that I can do, and I'm going to give my best shot at this test, as opposed to the original thought of being like, I'm going to fail. I'm going to do so bad. I've prepared, and I'm going to do the best I can. And they know that those, like, just a simple reframe like that will actually make you perform better on tests, right? They actually know that when I hear this all the time. I'm an anxious test taker, right? Which I think means you don't like tests and you're not confident about your abilities. They know that when people are informed that anxiety can actually promote positive test results, they do better. So it's just these simple reframes, which do a lot in terms of like performance in general. But building this kind of emotional intelligence is really important. We talked about how CEOs more often than not more emotionally capable than even like an IQ kind of based intelligent based thing. Um, they Emotional intelligence allows you to process emotions so that they're not repressed and potentially turn into like symptoms, physical manifestations, diseases, all of that kind of stuff. You're able to perform a little bit better if you can process and reframe things. So I think that's what I'm understanding. That's what I'm taking away from the conversation today.
Well said. Yeah, I think you've wrapped it up really nicely.
Okay.
And if I could just add like one piece to it, it's don't be afraid of it.
Mm.
It's not good or bad. It's just a process of learning, just like everything else.
Yeah.
The more you do it, the more you allow yourself to feel these feelings that you've perceived to be bad, the less intense they become, the less the less hold they get over you.
Mm.
And the last piece I would say is this is all natural, normal stuff. This isn't that you're wrong or weak or slow or can't. This is just normal stuff that our bodies and our minds have evolved to do. And there's a reason for it. It keeps us healthy and safe. All of these emotions are designed to keep us healthy and safe. The good ones, the bad ones. There really aren't any distinction. They're just emotions.
Nice. I like it. Well said.
Well done.
Yeah. All right. You can check us out on Spotify, YouTube, all the major podcast platforms, and we'll catch you next time.